Here we are again, getting closer and closer to the most critical lines in Scotch. Bishop a6, knight d2. We already looked at the old main move b3 in the previous video. We looked there quite a bit of options for white, and I think that we would all agree it's not the most critical and aggressive option white could have. That is why, as I promised you in that video, in this one we're going to analyze the very big line, most popular, knight d2. I know in the beginning of the video I promised you that I hoped I would give you enough energy, enthusiasm, motivation, knowledge to play these sharp positions, but so far what you saw in b3 line was not that sharp or complicated. It was just solid endgame option. Yeah, that's not what we were looking for. So exactly this line with knight d2 is the heart of the Scotch. And I'd like to divide this line into two parts. The first one, this one, would be about sidelines and a bit of main lines, and in the next video we would already get to the heart of Scotch and see the most critical, most played lines. I hope you're enough motivated, so let's get started and see what is the biggest idea of knight d2. Is it just a development or there is something more? The move I like is knight d2 is just because that this knight gives an option to c1 bishop, not only to develop via b3 and bishop b2, but also to develop via c1 h6 diagonal on g5 square. I know now we temporarily blocked the c1 bishop by playing knight d2, but this knight is not going to stay here. It goes to f3 and supports bishop g5 as well the pawn on e5. Black here has quite a bit of options. Main move here is g6, obviously very logical, we've seen it many times. Bishop g5, bishop g7, castle, and black wants an easy development and then pressure on e5 pawn. But before we get to the main line, let's see other options with castle and f6. Let's start with this very rare move. Quite an interesting one though, because it directly asks white, what are we going to do in the center? Are we going to leave this pawn on e5, or we have to already get to the end game and take on f6? Here I think that ef is the correct move, and knight f6, it looks very interesting from both sides, with white and with black, and I would recommend you here to play b3. I think that white's play in this position is much easier than black's. Bishop develops via b2, long castle. If queen e2, bishop e2 happens, and still black has problem with this a6 bishop, where to develop. Does he want to play c5, bishop b7? Is there a right time? Well, so far I think that white is doing okay. I even tried the move queen e4, which is also interesting option. But I thought that after knight b6, e takes f6, queen e4, knight e4, bishop c4, black has quite normal endgame, very fine one, and I don't think that white has much to do here. Anyway, with f6, ef, knight f6 and b3, I wouldn't go in this line much deeper because I think that white's play is much easier. Let's get to the knight d2 long castle, b3, f6, and now queen e4. After knight b6, here black has also two options. Knight to go to b6 or to b4. Let's see what the knight has to do here, because if our queen is not on e4, then we would have some problems on c2 double attack. Bishop b2, bishop b7. The position is getting very tense and sharp because both sides have some threats. Now, after bishop b7, black might think about c5. That's why we take on f6, g takes f6, queen e7, bishop e7, and king d1. Now, I think that the position is very double-edged, but I would prefer white here because black's pieces are still slightly misplaced and not coordinated. Black has to do something here in the center or give space and freedom to his pieces, otherwise slowly but surely white would get very clear big advantage. c5 has to be played. Other moves, let's say, I don't know, like rook e8, some kind of developing move to get out of this pin on a1, h8 diagonal. Just the rook is coming to an open file after bishop moves. Then simple a3, knight a6, there is no other way. Bishop d3, tempo, the pawn is hanging on h3, h7, and something like h6 would not help black's position, just because after rook e1, again this bishop cannot move from e7, and after king c2, rook doubles on e file, we have great advantage. And we can see that still this knight is not doing great here. After rook e1, knight c5 is of course possible, but even bishop g6 would win the bishop here. So black actually has to do something, and bishop d6 would be not that great, not because we would take the pawn on f6, it's also possible, but after rook e1, king e1, rook e8, and king f1, black cannot take the pawn on h2, but after knight c5, maybe black would have a little bit of play, although it's much better for white anyway. Though after knight c5, after bishop d6, there is another move, king c2, keeping the position under control. If rook e1 happens, then we can take back with the rook, and it's much better than king e1. And I think that this is the position where we can for sure say that white has clear advantage. So after king d1, the move that is kind of a must move is c5, a3, knight c6. Of course not knight a6, because this knight would be bad on that square. Bishop e2, knight d4. I don't see any other good options for black. Okay, of course rook g8 is a logical and a valid option for black, but after bishop f3, then black should be ready to exchange the light squared bishop as well. If now knight d4 happens, then after bishop b7, king b7, bishop d4, and cd4, knight is much better in this endgame than the bishop on e7. And anyway, it would not make big sense here, because after bishop e2, knight d4, we're going to take this knight on d4, cd4, and anyway play bishop f3, not to allow black to have advantage of two bishops and have much better pawn structure, and the knight is also better than the bishop when the pawns are a bit weak on the king side. So that's it for knight b4. Let's take a look at knight b6 option. Knight b6, bishop b2, f takes e5 and bishop e2. We should not take on e5, of course, because queen e5, bishop e5, and rook e8 would lose a piece for us. Hopefully you remember that we had same ideas when black took the pawn on e5. We would pin the bishop and win that one. So we should not get into same trap, and don't be greedy, don't take the pawn back on e5, but just develop bishop e2, king b8. Otherwise, if not king b8 and let's say something like g6 would not be good because e5 pawn is hanging, but something like d6 also not possible because c6 pawn is hanging, but also we have here very powerful c5 breakthrough. The bishop is hanging on a6 and the knight as well, and if bishop e2, queen e2, now the knight has to go somewhere, or dc would look just so horrible, unbelievably horrible. Queen a6 and king b8. Now knight c4 gives white a perfect position. You might think of f takes e5 and why didn't we play c5 here if it was that great? But in this position it's of course not an option, because after bishop f8 the idea of us was not to take the knight on b6 and allow bishop a6 and even this we are getting the pawn here, but after king b7 black's position is perfect. We cannot castle short side. The bishop on a6 is just a monster bishop, and he will get the pawn back on a7. We would be left with a very poor position. That's why we play bishop e2 also to close this e file, king b8, and castle. Once again, we are not in hurry to take the pawn. Queen e5, bishop e5 would not be good also in this position, because after rook e8 we are not losing the piece, but then we would have problems to castle. Let's say bishop g3. There is a move knight d5. Again, problems with pin. C takes d5 looks very bad due to rook e2. And what else? Knight c3 is a threat. King f1 is of course possible, but it does not change the situation. It goes out of pin, but we still cannot take the knight on d5 next move. And knight can anyway go to c3, knight c3, or bishop can develop something like bishop b4, or even bishop a3 would be great for black. That's why castle. d5, very typical. We've already seen this idea lots of times in previous video. Queen c2 and e4. This position looks extremely complicated. What white has for the sacrificed pawn is that he's ahead in development. Once again, the knight on b6 is a big problem for the black pieces, and black is not developed. And also after e4, this bishop becomes very good on a1, h8 diagonal. We would play here rook ae1. We keep calm and go on to play with our plan. Bishop c8, the bishop was not doing anything on a6. And here we have very powerful move, which is an idea to remember, because let's say here, if black tried to play on development of this bishop on f8 and play, let's say, something like queen f7, we could go c5. With rook ae1, we defended the bishop on e2, and after bishop e2, rook e2, this knight once again is in danger. If let's say knight d7, then b4, b5, opening up the queen side would look very, very dangerous for black. Something like bishop e7, bishop f6, or I don't know, rook e8, knight e5 does not look that great for black, because even queen a4, queen g6, and rook e3 with the idea of rook a3 is completely crushing. That's why after rook a e1, queen f7 and moves like this is not great. Move queen c5, let's say, not to allow c5, would run into a3 and b4. That's why rook a e1, bishop c8 is played. And here, pay attention. We're not losing time to prepare the advance of the pawns, but we go directly. b4. This is the move I like very much. It shows that how much we want to mate black pieces. We don't count pawns. We are just looking at the power of pieces. After b4, obviously, queen b4 looks very dangerous to open this file for black, because the king is there on b8. We would definitely go rook b1 right away, or there is a threat of bishop g7 now, so queen has to go away. Let's say queen e7 or queen d6 is not, it's not there's not much difference there in these two moves. We would simply take on d5, cd5, cd5. You don't want to leave these pawns without any support on c7 and c6. That's why cd5 and cd5 and a4. And look at our position. All pieces have power. a4, a5 is the threat. Now all files are open. Rook c1, rook b1, bishop, knight can jump, and this is great initiative for white. This is what we are looking for when I say sharp positions, complicated ones. And when I promised you to give you this energy and enthusiasm, motivation, all these things, I meant this type of sacrifices and this type of moves. You should not look at, oh my God, I'm pawn down and what should I do? Should I think of getting it back? Usually the problem is that when we sacrifice something, we kind of in ourselves, we want to get it back. We want to somehow get something for it. But sometimes there are positions where we're giving this pawn not because to take it back afterwards, but because to open lines, because to get initiative. That's why this is a perfect example, and generally this scotch is a perfect opening to get you used to this kind of positional sacrifices, so that you're not getting anything right away, no mate, no material advantage, but slowly but surely you're building a very dangerous attack. Okay, I guess that's it for this long castle, and now let's see what's going on g6. Once again, I told you that it is quite logical move. Just black wants to develop knight f3 and bishop g7. Here I will take a look at these two options, bishop g7 and knight b6. But the main move here, which is very much played, which is very popular, is queen b4. This is the heart of Scotch, so I'm not going to touch it in this video. Let's analyze it in the next one. Knight f3, bishop g7, or knight b6. Let's start with knight b6 because there is an obvious threat of taking the pawn on c4. Now I would like to show you two options for white. One is queen c2, another one is b3, of course. Let's say b3, bishop g7, and white here once again has two options where to develop the bishop. To b2, because we played b3, or to g5, because we have the knight on f3. Both are interesting, but bishop g5 is that it allows queen a3, and I don't like it a bit because then we cannot castle. We of course always have an option to go bishop c1 and queen b4, bishop d2. There is no problem about this, but I don't think that we should go for perpetual, or we should go for repetition here. That's why I don't like that bishop g5 allows queen a3. That's why I think that bishop b2 in this position is more correct. And after castle, long castle, bishop b7 once again. This is very common move. First, black plays bishop a6 to provoke something like b3 or queen e4 or something like this, or just to keep the knight on d5 and have the pin. And then, of course, bishop's place is not on a6 because, first of all, it closes the movement of a pawn, and second of all, it's not doing anything there. b3, c4 is standing so good that black's bishop is just closed. So bishop b7 is a very common idea, and now it's time to take care of the king side. Remember, I told you it is always nice to first develop, take care of your king, and then start attack on the king side. That's what we are going to do. Play h4 now. h4 and a5. And this position is the position which I think is double-edged, very complicated, but I would prefer to be with white pieces here. It's about who will be faster, black or white. Although I don't think that anything dangerous is going to happen to us if black plays a4, ab first, because our king, I think, is quite safe on queen side. Let's take a bit more deeper look. Let's say h5, a4, and here moves like king c2 is possible, or queen e3. Queen e3 I like because it opens the f1 bishop and also defends the pawn on b3. And if we are in time also to play some kind of knight jump, then this queen can go to h3. Very double-edged position, but that's what we were looking for. Chances for both sides, but I would still prefer white. Okay, this is playable for both, but it's not the line which you're forced to go. On knight b6 you have another option, which is queen c2. No big provocations of b3 and bishop b7, a5, but just normal queen c2, open up the diagonal for white, and queen c2 also defends the c4 pawn. Bishop g7, bishop e2, castle, castle. This is completely different position of what we saw in the previous line with b3. If we had there different castles, castle on long side and castle on short side, here we have castles on one side, and there is no direct attack like h4, h5 like we saw in the previous line. Here we're more playing on black's pieces and to get squares from them rather than having attack. First, we have to consolidate, we have to coordinate, we have to get our pieces all in the center, and then we have to think of some action on the side, on the flanks, or in the center. In this position, I think that white has much nicer position than black, because black still needs to, yes, every piece is developed and we have our bishop still on our starting position, but the pieces are not developed on their ideal squares. And this is why black needs a lot of regroupment, a lot of plans. He needs to think where to put which piece, and I think it's much tougher in this position to play with black pieces rather than with white one. I think that's it for the knight b6 line, and now let's take a look at bishop g7. What I want to say is that you should not expect from the opening a very clear advantage. What we are looking for is playable position with lots of options and with various plans, when we can switch the plans, either play positionally, either go for an attack. The Scotch exactly gives these opportunities to play like universally, also to play end games, also to play for an attack, also to play positional and sharp openings all together, not openings, sharp and positional lines all together. That is why I am so impressed with this opening, and I really fell in love with it. Okay, bishop g7, bishop g5 now, f6, e takes f6, queen e2, bishop e2, knight f6, long castle and long castle. Now we got an endgame. There are no queens anymore, and we are playing for, we are a bit ahead in development, and once again, black's pieces are not on their ideal squares. Though we also need some regroupment, because we have better squares for our pieces, and we start with knight d2. I think that's a very interesting option, although there was a game of Caruana Kramnik in 2012, which was a very nice game by Fabiano. He played here bishop e3, kind of attacking the a7 pawn, but of course Kramnik ignored the fact that it's hanging, and played rook de8. First of all, we are pinning, well, black is pinning the bishop, so we cannot take the pawn. Bishop d3 and d6. Once again, the pawn is hanging, but it is not good to take it, because then our bishop after c5 would be trapped there, and we will lose it. So after d6, c5, bishop d3, rook d3, knight d5, c takes d6, c takes d6, bishop a7, and king c7. I think that this position is very double-edged, but close to equal. Though you should definitely see this game, because a player, top player, world champion like Kramnik got into trouble and lost the game. So it's not like I can say here, yeah, black has perfect equal position and it's for sure going to be draw. It is very complicated, and even top players have problems to sometimes defend the position. This is it about bishop e3, but let's take a look at knight d2, which I think is a bit more attractive option, because we regroup our pieces. Knight d2, bishop goes to f3, c5 was played in the game of Anish Giri, my husband, and Dominguez. And I don't choose this knight d2 line, and I don't recommend you to play the knight d2 line just because my husband played it. No, of course. But the idea is that I like the regroupment. I like where pieces are standing after knight d2, and I also like that after bishop f3, black cannot really go bishop b7 and exchange this light squared bishop, then because afterwards white would have much easier play. c5 was played in the game, but much more tough option for much more stronger. Much stronger. I already forgot how to speak. Much stronger option would be right away to play rook de8, bishop f3, c5, and rook he1, bishop b7, take on b7, and king b7. And this is very complicated endgame. I still like white. I would prefer to play with white pieces, but it for sure does not mean that black is in a big trouble. Just a little plus that black's pawns on c5 are doubled, and also we are fighting for the e-file. The bishop on g7 is for now closed, and black still does not have perfect squares for their pieces. Okay, after c5, the game went bishop f3, d6, rook he1, rook de8, and bishop c6. Here knight d7 was played, but after very strong move, knight e4, bishop c4, and knight c5, white had a big plus in the game. This is important, this idea, knight d7 and knight e4. It's not very easy to make this move and to see that after knight c5, black cannot take on c5 because this one is hanging, or with this pawn, with this knight, then rook is hanging. Also, after knight c5, black has big problems to defend the d7 knight. Rook e1 can be played, but we take with the check, king b8, rook e1, and d takes c5. You see, we both have two bishops on the board, but pawn structure is a lot better for white. I think that's it for the sidelines and a bit of main lines in this video. I know it took me a lot of time to explain you all the ideas I wanted to share with you, but hopefully you did not get bored yet, because right in the next video we're going to touch the Scotch heart and we're gonna do some analysis to it. So be strong and see you soon.